a young man is accidentally transported to a fantastical land, where he decides to use the favors of a goddess to start a new life as an alchemist. The protagonist is blinded by a strange light, unable to understand what is happening. When he regains consciousness, he sees a beautiful woman welcoming him to Midgard, the place where he has been summoned through otherworldly magic. She introduces herself as the goddess Nolan and apologizes to him, explaining that his summoning was a mistake. The protagonist becomes even more confused, so the goddess clarifies. The summoning process is like a claw machine game, where a target is selected for summoning. Unfortunately, he was affected, despite not being the intended target. She explains that interworld summoning magic is extremely dangerous and can even destroy an entire world, which is why it is forbidden. However, a problematic nation ignored those rules and performed the summoning. Nolan tried to intervene as quickly as possible, but was unable to stop it, which is why he is now there. The protagonist asks if the others who were summoned are also in this place. Nolan responds that those individuals were summoned directly to the Holy Empire of Cydonia. The protagonist finally understands that this is all a grave mistake and asks the goddess to send him back to his world. However, she regretfully explains that she cannot, as she was so angered by the forbidden summoning that she patched the magic, making it unusable forever. She tries to explain that the patch is a distortion of space and time, but the protagonist asks her to get to the point. Nolan sums it up. I can't send you back to your world, and in fact, you no longer even have a body to return to. The protagonist then realizes he has no body and is only a small ball of energy. The goddess informs him that in addition to being transported, his body was destroyed due to an error. Unsure of what will become of him, the goddess advises him to resign himself and start a new life in Midgard. The protagonist asks if he can also go to Cydonia with the rest of the summoned. Nolan considers it an option, but warns that it's a problematic place where he would be mistreated for being a mistake. Feeling guilty about what happened, the goddess promises her support to help him start over. She explains that, much like in video games, there are monsters and adventures here. However, instead of being excited, the protagonist is concerned. Nolan assures him he will be fine since he has a goddess's support and asks him to think about his stats. An information window appears revealing his details. His name is Takum, and he will be 17 years old. The protagonist finds this alarming, as he is actually 40 and a businessman. Nolan tells him not to sweat the details and points out that there are no businessmen in Midgard. He must now choose between being a combatant, such as a knight, mage, or hunter, or a creator, such as a blacksmith, herbalist, or alchemist. The protagonist dislikes conflict and chooses to be a creator. Nolan creates a crystal with her power, recommends that he learn to use his skills well, and gives him practical magic and healing spells for self-defense. The crystal flies into the protagonist's body, and Nolan bids him farewell, wishing him a good journey to Asugard. Takumi appears in a field, looks at his reflection in the water, and discovers he is now a very handsome young man. He checks his bag, finding food and some money. He also checks his stats, which are all at level 1, though he has elemental magic. Notably, it is marked that the goddess Nolan owes him a favor, which worries him as he hides it, fearing someone might find out. He also finds an item box. Testing his magic, he starts with a small water ball and then practices shooting stones. He becomes excited about living in a fantasy world. Exploring the forest in search of a city, he finds a wooden stick. Analyzing it, he discovers it's treant wood, used for wands and magical items. Using his smithing magic, he transforms it into a spear. He uses his evaluation skill to search for more items and finds herbs for potions and poisons, gathering so much that his bag overflows. He remembers he has an item box, an infinite storage space connected to a temporal void. At that moment, he hears a girl screaming for help. She takes shelter behind him, pursued by a giant rabbit with a horn. Takumi, terrified, grabs his spear to defend himself. When the rabbit attacks, he manages to land a strike, unlocking the spear mastery skill. Takumi is shocked by his first victory and thanks the goddess for her favors, though she knows it was just luck. A new stat, Warrior, unlocks, confusing Takumi, who wanted nothing to do with violent skills. The girl thanks him for saving her. Takumi asks where she's from, and she replies that she comes from Baude village and only ventured into the forest for medicinal herbs. He asks if he can accompany her, and she happily agrees, suggesting they take the rabbit with them, as it could make a feast. He agrees and stores the rabbit in his item box. The girl is amazed by what he did, and Takumi remembers he should keep the item box a secret. However, he brushes it off, and they set off. The girl introduces herself as Molly. Meanwhile, in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, the group of summoned individuals wonder where they are. A hooded woman welcomes them and explains that they are no longer in their world and have been summoned to save this one with their power. The woman introduces herself as Elizabeth, the first imperial princess of Sidonia. The boys are struck by her beauty, but Akane, one of the summoned girls, feels suspicious. Suddenly, Akane's revelation ability activates, a skill granted to her by Nolan, who also tells her that her intuition will guide her to the right answer. Using this, Akane realizes that Elizabeth cannot be trusted. Meanwhile, Takumi brings the little girl back to her parents, who thank him profusely. Takumi tells them he's just a young explorer gathering ingredients, but plans to stay in the village for a while. Molly's parents think that's a good idea since the area is rich in ingredients and even minerals valuable for crafting. The only downside is that there are no inns in the village. They suggest a simple solution: building his own house. They take him to a small plot of land. Takumi uses earth magic to flatten the ground, but the effort drains him and leaves him exhausted. The villagers are amazed by Takumi's magic and offer to finish the work for him. The next day, the small house is complete, simple yet cozy and well organized. Takumi checks his stats, which have significantly increased thanks to all the work. However, he's annoyed that his job still shows him as both a warrior and a mage. He changes the warrior class to alchemist, the path he truly wishes to pursue. He mines some minerals in the village, collecting iron, silver, and copper, as well as some magical iron. Using his alchemy skills, he transforms the iron fragments into an ingot. Excited, Takumi overworks himself and collapses. Molly brings him dinner one evening and finds him unconscious on the floor. Molly's mother scolds him, urging him to be more cautious. After they give him a healing potion, Takumi resumes his alchemy practice, though he takes breaks this time. Molly and her mother check on him periodically. He gathers many metals and crafts various kitchen utensils, which boosts his alchemist level. Takumi also starts working with Bobon, the village blacksmith, which increases his blacksmith stats. One day, Takumi visits Molly's father to request some potions, as he wants to study them and synthesize his own. Molly's father agrees on the condition that Takumi sells him some potions afterward. Back at his house, Takumi mixes herbs, reminiscing about his school days. When he finishes, he compares his potion to Molly's father's potions and notices the colors are different. He wonders what he did differently and hypothesizes that the difference lies in the use of magical water. Determined to discover new recipes, he ventures into the forest to experiment with different poisonous herbs. After purifying himself with a light spell, Takumi unlocks the skills Poison Resistance and Paralysis Resistance. He pushes himself to improve his resistance and light magic stats, but the effort leaves him exhausted and in pain. Suddenly, a giant armored boar appears from the trees, looking furious and ready to attack. Takumi tries throwing a knife, but it bounces harmlessly off the boar's skin. He attempts to block the attack with his spear, but it breaks without harming the boar. Barely dodging the attack, Takumi uses air and stone magic to strike the boar, but they are ineffective. Panicking, Takumi notices an unusual poisonous spider in the grass. He's now surrounded by two dangerous creatures and contemplates escaping, but the spider appears injured. The boar charges and Takumi braces for the end, but the spider leaps onto the boar's face, distracting it. Despite the spider's efforts, it is gravely injured and the boar remains unscathed. In despair, Takumi begins to cry, thinking it's the end for him. At that moment, he unlocks a skill called Intuition, and an idea suddenly comes to mind. As the boar charges, Takumi uses his creation magic at close range, finally bringing the beast down. Takumi unlocks skills for magical and martial combat. His practice with creation magic has saved him. He tends to the critically injured spider, healing it as thanks for saving him. He bids the spider farewell and prepares to return to the village. However, he learns the taming skill and is given the option to tame the poisonous spider. Reluctant at first to have a spider as a companion, Takumi softens when the spider looks endearing and asks if it wants to join him. When the spider agrees, he names it Maple after the maple leaf-shaped mark on its back. The spider glows, grows larger, and heals completely, evolving into a venom assassin spider. Overjoyed, Maple pledges her eternal loyalty to Takumi. Back in the village, Takumi presents the boar he defeated to the astonished villagers. While its massive size leaves them speechless, they are even more stunned by the spider perched on his shoulder. Takumi reassures them, explaining that he has tamed Maple, though the villagers are baffled since such spiders are believed untamable. Putting their doubts aside, the villagers cook the boar for a grand feast. They also give Takumi some parts of the boar to craft leather armor and extra materials to sell in the city. In the sky, Nolan watches Takumi, proud of his progress. Another goddess approaches Nolan, questioning her actions, giving Takumi a special body, multiple blessings, and even sending him to this world a year before Sidonia's summoning spell activated. Nolan brushes off the questions, claiming she had no particular reason. Takumi wakes up one morning to find himself wrapped in a spider web. He immediately suspects Maple, who tries to act innocent and pretend she doesn't know what happened. Takumi scolds her, explaining that she can't do that. Maple eventually admits her mistake and apologizes, but explains she did it because Takumi has been so busy with his potions and alchemy lately that he hasn't had time to play with her. Takumi agrees and decides not to work that day, choosing instead to spend the day playing with Maple. This makes the spider very happy, and she starts jumping on Takumi. At that moment, Molly's mother Martha sees the scene and panics, thinking that Maple is trying to eat him. Takumi explains the situation to calm her down. As Martha looks around, she notices the fine quality of the spider web and grows interested. She uses the web to make clothes that impress all her friends. Spider webs are considered a luxury material, primarily used by nobles. Martha asks Maple to produce more web. Takumi tries to explain that only he can communicate with Maple, but it seems Maple understands Martha well enough as she begins providing what she requests. Takumi reminds Maple that they were supposed to play that day, but the spider replies that she's too busy with work now. Takumi decides to return to his tasks, reflecting that it's been a month since he arrived. He plans to visit a city soon to study alchemy. He visits the blacksmith and receives a gift, a boar hide armor. Bobon, the blacksmith, points out that it needs adjustments to be efficient in combat. Takumi insists the adjustments are unnecessary since he focuses only on crafting. Bobon counters that no crafter travels the forest alone. Molly's father enters and asks how the armor turned out, knowing they need to hurry since Takumi might leave for the city soon. Takumi, feeling a bit sad, agrees, but his friends understand his reasons and support him. They tell him a merchant from the city of Bolton will arrive in a few days and they'll arrange for him to travel with the merchant. Later, Takumi encounters Martha, carrying a bucket of rabbit meal they caught the other day. She explains that they're the tastiest parts but can harbor parasites and diseases if untreated, so they must be discarded. Takumi offers to purify them using his magic. Instantly, the meals change color and become safe to eat. Martha is surprised to see he can now use light magic. She thanks him but advises him not to use such magic openly. Few people can use light magic, and those who can often become very wealthy. While it might not matter in this village, it's better to keep a low profile. In the following days, Takumi uses earth magic to reinforce the village walls and his knowledge to install water wells. Before leaving, he wants to express his gratitude by doing all he can for the village. The day finally arrives. The merchant from Bolton, Mr. Popek, has arrived. Molly's father, Binda, prepares his order. Takumi joins them. Binda introduces Takumi, and they get ready for the journey. Takumi tells Binda he left about 100 potions at his house and asks him to give them to those in need. The potion immediately catches Popek's attention. Takumi explains that it's just a basic potion he crafted. Popek examines it closely and notices something special about it. Martha arrives with other villagers to bid Takumi farewell. She gives him a parting gift, a beautiful custom-made coat. It was made using Maple's thread, and the children helped with the design and patterns. Takumi thanks everyone for everything they've done for him. He begins his journey, with the villagers bidding him a heartfelt farewell. This village was the first place in Nilfgaard he lived in, and from now on, he will consider it his home. Popek notices how beloved Takumi is in the village. One of his companions even tears up, touched by how special everything was. The three men accompanying them introduce themselves to Takumi: Heath, Riel, and Bogar. They are members of Lionfang, a C-rank adventurer group tasked with escorting Popek. While they believe the area is safe, they prefer to be cautious. Riel notices Takumi carrying a large sack with great care and asks what's inside. Takumi replies, "It's a killer spider." The adventurers are shocked to hear he managed to tame a spider. Riel tries to look inside, but the sack jumps and hits him hard in the face. Takumi scolds Maple for doing that, but Heath insists the fault lies with Riel for approaching so suddenly. He even blames him if Maple now fears people, but they discover Maple sleeping soundly next to Bogar. Popek calls Takumi and asks if he has more potions like the one he showed Banga, as he'd like to buy some. Takumi agrees to sell them. Suddenly, the cart stops abruptly. The adventurers, excited, prepare for a fight. The group of goblins emerges from the forest and heads toward the cart. Popek panics comically. The goblins attack, but the adventurers defeat them with ease. Once the goblins are dealt with, they collect the magic stones left behind. Maple warms up to Bogar, dislikes Riel, and is indifferent to Heath. After this minor incident, the journey continues peacefully. 3 days later, they finally arrive in Bolton, the first city of Mildgard that Takumi visits. Everything amazes Takumi about the city. The first thing he does is accompany Lion Fang to deliver their report to the Adventurers Guild. If he wants to remain in the city, he also needs to register both Maple and himself as adventurers. Initially, Takumi would have preferred to register with the Alchemists Guild, but unfortunately, Bolton doesn't have one. He has to settle for the Adventurers Guild so he can use the guild card as a personal ID. The lowest rank card doesn't expire as long as he completes at least one request per month. After finishing his registration, he heads to the Popek company, where Takumi shows Popek the types of potions he has for sale. Excited by the deal, Popek offers him 10 silver coins for each basic healing and stamina potion, and 50 silver coins for each mana potion. Takumi does the math and realizes he's just made a small fortune. Takumi thinks he might be overpaid, but Popek explains that, as an unknown crafter, the payment is below average. Something about Popek's generosity feels suspicious to Takumi. Still, Popek doesn't seem like someone who deceives people. Interrupting Takumi's thoughts, Popek advises him to establish himself in a workshop to further his crafting career. Takumi explains he's just arrived in the city and can't afford a house with or without a workshop. Popek suggests renting one and even offers to show him some properties. He rings a bell and his assistant, Thomas, appears. Popek asks Thomas to show Takumi a house, and Takumi is surprised to find it's practically a mansion. Thomas tells him the rent is 1 gold and 50 silver coins per month. It seems like a great price to Takumi, but he suspects it might be haunted. Thomas assures him the house has a good reputation. Takumi considers he can pay the rent by selling potions. When Maple asks where they are, Takumi replies that it's their new home and agrees to the deal. Thomas begins the paperwork, and they plan to move in the next day. Takumi thanks him, but notices something bothering his nose. Since arriving in the city, he sensed something odd in the air. Thomas explains that it's due to the sewage system beneath the city. Nobles use artifacts to reduce the stench, but the city can't afford them. Priests are hired to purify the sewers occasionally, but it doesn't help much. The following day, Takumi and Maple move into their new home. Wasting no time, Takumi begins a new project. He mixes the clay he bought from Popek and molds it using magic. Once dry, he heats it with a temperature control spell, then uses a space-time spell to speed up the firing process, strengthening it and setting its final shape. When finished, Takumi is exhausted from the magical effort, but the result is worth it. He's created a bathroom. Takumi knows it's the one thing he truly missed in this world. Suddenly, he hears Popek shouting in the house. Takumi rushes to see what's wrong and finds him wrapped in a spiderweb. Takumi asks Maple what she did, and she replies that she was simply welcoming him. Takumi explains that only the village children enjoyed that kind of welcome. However, Popek finds the web so comfortable he decides to take a nap. Takumi untangles him and apologizes. Popek doesn't mind and asks to use the bathroom. Takumi shows him the way, but is soon alarmed when Popek calls him again. Popek is shocked and asks what kind of bathroom it is. Takumi explains it's a toilet that purifies waste, separating clean water from organic matter. Popek is astonished and asks if Takumi can use light magic. Takumi remembers Martha's warning and begs Popek to keep it a secret. Popek agrees but asks Takumi to make 100 more of these toilets. Feeling obligated, Takumi agrees, provided he can get the necessary materials. Popek thanks him and suggests hiring workers. Takumi had already considered hiring an assistant, but Popek recommends using servants. He explains that a servant would manage the household, ensure security, and be bound by contract magic to keep secrets. Takumi feels it's too much, so Popek explains that using light magic marks someone as divinely chosen, or so it's believed. This is why the Divine Light Church takes in light magic users, profiting from their healing abilities. Popek warns that the church won't take kindly to toilets using purifying magic. Takumi asks if it's safe to produce them. Popek assures him he has a plan to gain support for the project, but insists they keep the creator's identity secret. Using servants is the best way to ensure that. Takumi refuses, saying that exploiting people is wrong. He'd rather do it alone. At that moment, he receives a message from the guild reminding him to complete his monthly requests. With the guild tasks and toilet production, Takumi realizes he can't handle everything on his own. Popek takes him to the Mulan Company, the most reliable place to find servants. There, Takumi meets a blonde-haired girl who promptly tells him to get lost.
Upon arriving at Mulan's house, the blonde elf quickly locks eyes with our protagonist and tells him to leave as soon as possible. She adds that this place isn't meant for foolish children like him. This obviously catches our protagonist off guard, but he decides to ignore her and heads straight for Mulan. Once in front of her, the chubby man introduces Takumi, admitting that our protagonist is looking for servants, as where he comes from, aggressive contracts against people are not accepted. Hearing all this, the woman explains how the contracts work. Essentially, the contract guarantees that any servant will have basic rights, including food, water, shelter, and other necessities. Moreover, no servant is to put their life at risk. However, they are forbidden from breaking the contract or leaking any information about their master. Seeing this, the protagonist realizes that servants are not as mistreated as he initially thought. Mulan then goes into more detail about the types of contracts, explaining that some people accrue debt and are forced into service until they can repay all of it. On the other hand, there are criminals who work until they can reintegrate into society, essentially people who must work to pay their debt to the community. But just when everything seems very proper, Mulan reveals that there are also contracts where people are unjustly treated as criminals. The chubby man mentions that the protagonist might need one of these servants since, as a creator mage, he requires someone to handle his basic needs. This surprises Takumi, who quickly tries to change the subject, explaining the situation to Mulan. He admits that he's looking for someone who can accompany and protect him, as being a creator mage is incredibly challenging, especially considering he's part of an adventurer group. Mulan suggests he get 2 servants, one to manage his household and another for protection. She quickly introduces Miss Maria, who was recruited by criminals some time ago. Mulan mentions that Maria knows how to read and write and can handle any household chores. Seeing her, our protagonist is immediately struck by her appearance. He begins explaining the layout of the house to make the tasks easier, but at the same time, he finds it odd that no one has hired her yet since she is very beautiful. Naturally, this makes the young woman blush, nearly causing her to lose her balance. After this, Maria admits she can do more for him, such as accompany him at night, which causes the protagonist to have very perverted thoughts about her. However, she only meant accompanying him to ensure he doesn't trip or get hurt. After this somewhat awkward moment, Mulan asks if he will make the contract with her, and the protagonist quickly agrees in the condition that Maria consents, which she happily does. Mulan informs the protagonist that no combat servants are available, but Maria mentions Sophia, angering the black-haired woman. The protagonist insists on meeting any available servant, surprising Mulan. He encounters the blonde elf from before, learning that she was a prisoner of war for 50 years and remains injured, unable to use spiritual magic. Despite this, the protagonist insists on speaking with her. Sophia claims she is cursed and useless in battle, but upon reading her stats, he realizes she is extremely powerful. Convinced she could be a valuable ally if healed, he decides to make a contract with her, despite her protests. Back in the main hall, Mulan drafts the contracts. Maria is grateful that Sophia was also hired. A binding spell finalizes the agreements, and both servants express their gratitude. Upon returning home, Maple jumps on the protagonist, alarming the girls until he explains she is the family pet. He shows them their massive rooms, making them uneasy, but he insists they enjoy their stay, including the luxurious bath. During their bath, Sophia notes the contracts lack information about their master, leading them to question his true nature. That night, the protagonist prepares a lavish banquet, making Maria feel guilty. He reassures her that she can cook the next day, as this dinner is to celebrate their first day in the mansion. Seeing all this, Sophia quickly admitted that eating alongside their master was disrespectful. However, he had no issue with it, saying that was nonsense because he wanted to be their companion, not their master. He then asked them not to call him master anymore, but to use his name instead. The next day, our protagonist headed to Pape Company, where the chubby man handed him a well-sealed package. Upon leaving, he stumbled upon a church he hadn't seen before and decided to go inside. In that place, he found the statue of the goddess Nolan and decided to pray in front of it, thinking about what she had told him some time ago regarding the sacred empire of Sidonia. But as he was deep in thought, Nolan appeared before him with a very cheerful expression. The protagonist was surprised, but decided to listen to what she had to say. She began explaining everything about the sacred kingdom of Sidonia, revealing that there were 2 religions, creationism and divine light. On one hand, creationism worshipped the goddess Nolan as their sole deity, but later, divine light emerged and invented a new god. Since then, the sacred empire of Sidonia worked tirelessly every day to ensure that religion gained a lot of power. Being fanatical about this religion, they started inventing spells to summon people from another world, which inadvertently involved the protagonist even though he wasn't their intended target. Still, Nolan reminded him that the favor she granted wouldn't last forever, as he would meet new people and expand his empire as he progressed. Along the way, he would face many challenges and encounter malicious people with ill intentions. This made the protagonist realize that he had only encountered good people so far. For that reason, he resolved to be more cautious moving forward. After making it clear that everything depended on him, the goddess left, and our protagonist rose with a new vision in his mind. A year later, we see a terrifying castle where a bald man asks about the heroes they have been summoning. The men in front of him reveal that both Homer and Packard are training the three individuals. At the same time, they introduce Miss Elizabeth, who convinced the men to help them with this. Here, we see the young Akira and Mr. Yamato training with all their might. Their trainer urged them not to hold back, saying they wouldn't be able to maintain a good rhythm on the battlefield otherwise. Watching them, a hooded figure admitted that Yamato was finished. This reminded him of his past, when a mere child managed to defeat him in a combat competition, making him feel furious and declare that it wasn't over yet. This man asked Akane to join the fight, and even though she didn't want to since she thought it was pointless, Elizabeth arrived, asking her to join because she had comforting companions and it was a good time to train. Seeing her, Akane sensed a malicious presence in her, deciding to accept the request. Meanwhile, the protagonist returned home, tripped, and dropped his bag of items. When Sophia was about to pick it up, the protagonist did everything possible to prevent her from touching it, causing her to start distrusting him. At the workshop, she saw how the protagonist was doing some rather strange things, like mixing potions with a knife and later cutting himself, only to heal with the heal spell. Exhausted, he thought that this was very demanding, but he would do everything possible to level up. Hearing this, Sophia didn't hesitate to enter the room, admitting that she wouldn't allow him to harm Maria, only to collapse from extreme exhaustion. The protagonist then noticed she had a small wound on her hand and decided to heal it, realizing it wasn't as easy as he thought. The curse made it very difficult to heal her, but fortunately, he managed to do so and leveled up. In this way, he brought her home safely, where, with an incredible new ability, he managed to completely heal her. Upon waking up, she felt much lighter, realizing she had regained all her magical power. Understanding that the protagonist wasn't a bad person, she quickly approached him to apologize. He explained that he had done all those strange things to level up his light magic, allowing him to heal her. This surprised Sophia, who immediately began to cry, declaring her loyalty to him. If you've made it this far into the video, don't forget to write the word exquisito in the comment section. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video. The next morning, our protagonist went to the library to read about advanced alchemy, feeling a bit disappointed to find that in such a huge library, there were only 4 books on alchemy. It is then that our protagonist admits that alchemy is somewhat important. However, it becomes less useful over time. At that moment, he realizes the reason why it becomes useless. Apparently, any form of alchemy is written in a super difficult language to learn, but thanks to the powers of the goddess Nolan, he can easily read any language. Upon returning to his sweet home, our protagonist encounters Maria, who claims to have seen both him and Sophia outside the castle, making promises to each other. She compares them to a princess and a prince pledging loyalty to one another. The next day, very early in the morning, our protagonist and his companions are forced to polish some toilets that our dear Takumi made to sell in the town. Excited, Maria asks if he enjoys doing this, to which our protagonist reveals that he does, but he will still try to do something else, admitting that he is a big fan of traveling and adventures. He mentions that he has recently found some great landscapes for exploration, but states that Sophia must accompany him as a guard. Hearing this, Maria becomes a bit nervous upon realizing that Maple will also be joining them. She suggests going on the adventure too, but the protagonist admits that this could be very dangerous for her. Hearing this, Maria starts crying, admitting that cleaning such a big house without without them would make her job hell, something like being a toilet in the middle of the desert. This makes our protagonist start to reflect on whether to take her or not, but she quickly stands in front of him, asking him to let her join. It is then that Takumi decides to scan her abilities, discovering that she is extremely powerful, essentially a combat maid. Upon seeing these stats, the protagonist admits that she is quite skilled. Sophia then decides to intervene, saying it would be appropriate to take her, and she would take the opportunity to teach her magic. Knowing all this, the protagonist agrees without any objections. Later, Takumi takes both girls to craft their new combat weapons, first asking Sophia about her ideal weapon. She explains that she needs a long sword, approximately 50 centimeters, and a small round shield, something not too heavy for combat. This makes the protagonist realize that she is a full-fledged warrior. At the same time, he asks Maria what she needs to fight. She says that the best option would be a pair of daggers, since that's what she used in her previous place. However, Sophia suggests using a combat spear, promising to teach her how to use it. Excited, Maria agrees without hesitation. At nightfall, our protagonist begins crafting the weapons, as it is no easy task. Meanwhile, the two girls train with weapon replicas, where Maria is amazed by Sophia's spear skills. Afterward, the protagonist manages to finish all the work, feeling quite exhausted, but leveling up many skills in the process. To differentiate the weapons, Takumi adds custom seals, Sophia's bearing a wing, and Maria's a flame. Upon completion, he enchants them with damage increase and repair. Additionally, the protagonist crafts 3 daggers as a personal favor to Maria, but quickly has inappropriate thoughts, imagining the young girl carrying these daggers near her thighs, which causes a nosebleed due to his perverted nature. Following this, it's time for the protagonist to focus on the armor. He has no choice but to summon 2 life-size dolls of Maria and Sophia, claiming it's purely for testing the armor, although his expression suggests otherwise, as he quickly decides to check the busts of both mannequins. Thus, our protagonist, using boar leather and some maple spiderweb, begins crafting outfits based on his preferences. He then gives the armor to the girls, crying tears of joy as they look stunning in them. Although the outfits are quite revealing, the girls admit they feel extremely comfortable in them, asking Takumi how he managed to get their exact body measurements, which makes him feel a bit awkward. Next, it's time for the weapons, and both are extremely satisfied with their craftsmanship. Likewise, the protagonist gives them a pair of rings to help activate their magical powers. Realizing he used a lot of magic for this, both girls thank him from the bottom of their hearts. After all that, our protagonist took the 2 girls to register them in the guild so they could level up as they started defeating monsters. Quickly, the receptionist gave them their cards, stating that they would be ranked H, one of the lowest ranks. However, our protagonist understood the situation and swiftly approached the mission board, accepting a rank G mission. That's when Sophia told the protagonist to choose a stronger one, as completing that mission would not earn him any points. Hearing this, Takumi admitted he wasn't interested in leveling up in the guild. Suddenly, some rude men approached Maria and Sophia, telling them they could teach them better things than their weakling master. These guys claimed to be stronger than the protagonist, as they were ranked D, practically forcing the girls to go with them. As expected, our protagonist stepped in front of them to defend the girls, making the men furious and stating that someone as weak as him wouldn't be able to defeat them. Hearing this, the protagonist admitted to himself that he was extremely scared but still needed to defend his companions, insulting the big guy, who quickly punched him. However, he managed to block the hit with a magic armor, which ended up breaking the man's arm, causing the protagonist to level up his physical defense. At that moment, a man asked what the hell was going on there, questioning Takumi if he was responsible for all that. However, another man arrived to explain the entire situation to his master. Apparently, this bald man was named Barak and was the master of the entire guild. Hastily, the bald man ordered the injured guy to be taken away, then asked the protagonist to follow him. Once in his office, this man asked what he had done to the fat guy. Our protagonist explained everything that had happened, saying he had covered his body with coal he had in his hand, turning it into a diamond at the same time. Hearing this, the bald man's companion realized he had used alchemy. After learning that our protagonist couldn't join the alchemist guild, the guild master decided to raise the girls to rank D, explaining that since they were so attractive, many groups would bother them. Knowing this, the protagonist admitted he had already registered them, but the bald man's mage companion assigned them some simple tasks that would easily help them rank up. Thus, the protagonist's group set to work to complete the mission, starting with hunting goblins and other monsters, herbs, then collecting moril herbs. The girls easily took down the goblins, but Takumi grew suspicious of their unusually high numbers. Sophia suggested there might be a nearby camp with a goblin general, a powerful C-rank monster. Conquering it seemed impossible with their small group, but Maria and Sophia were determined to try. Meanwhile, Maple informed Takumi that she was about to evolve, so he hid her in a magical subspace. Upon reaching the goblin camp, they discovered over 300 enemies. After confirming no humans were around, they used their magic rings to unleash their full power, wiping out the base with ease. However, the real challenge remained the goblin leader and his guards. Sophia took the lead, cutting down many goblins, while Takumi fought the general, enhancing his physical abilities with his sword and magic to claim victory. Back at the guild, they were scolded for acting without permission. However, when Maple appeared after evolving into a beautiful girl, the guild leader was so shocked that he gave up on reprimanding them, admitting they were an unusual bunch. The receptionist quickly prepared their rewards, promoting Maria to rank D and Sophia to rank F. The next day, Maria asked Takumi for spare fabric, and he suggested using Maple's spider silk. When the topic shifted to underwear, Maria showed him a sketch, but Takumi had a different design in mind, making her extremely flustered. Soon after, Papek arrived to inform them that Margrave Godwin von Bolton wanted to meet Takumi. The noble expressed his gratitude for Takumi's purification items, which would improve the kingdom's hygiene and prevent pandemics. He also warned that the Holy Empire of Sidonia might interfere at any time. Exhausted, Takumi returned home, where the girls had made even more underwear to have extras. When they handed it to him, they blushed as he asked them to try it on. Embarrassed, Takumi quickly left the room. Alone, he found himself nervously wondering if he should try it on himself, but quickly dismissed the odor, did he? The next day, Takumi successfully created the refrigerators he had long desired. His friends were amazed by the invention and even used it to cool off, though he reminded them that wasn't its intended purpose. Crafting it had been a challenge he had to synthesize an alloy of iron, chromium, nickel, and stainless steel while maintaining focus to shape the box. Using a magical ice system, it functioned perfectly, making Maria happy since she could now cook with fresh ingredients. Meanwhile, Takumi was more concerned about choosing the right color, with Sophia suggesting sky blue. Motivated by this success, Takumi set his sights on the team's next project, upgrading their equipment. Having recently leveled up in smithing and alchemy, he planned to craft armor from mithril and adamantite, both extremely durable materials. His friends supported the idea, and even Maple wanted enhancements, though Takumi advised her not to rush her growth. Since skilled blacksmiths for such rare materials were scarce in Bolton, Takumi considered seeking one in the Nomstral Kingdom. The guild receptionist promised to provide information about smiths outside the region. He also questioned whether Takumi was an alchemist, as handling such tough materials required immense magical power, even at a beginner level. Luckily, a mine rich in mithril and adamantite lay just a few hours northwest in Barkula. However, access was restricted to blacksmith guild members. The receptionist proposed a loophole. Takumi could take a guild quest to clear monsters in the mine, allowing him entry as an emergency worker. Shifting topics, the guild master noted that Bolton had almost no tree and wood, a rare material overlooked by adventurers hunting black buffalo. With few willing to risk encounters with wild beasts, the wood had become exclusive to the city. However, this shortage led to an increase in wood monsters in the Forest of Death. Interestingly, Takumi's route coincided with his next mission, making it easy to hunt a few monsters along the way. However, it was the guild leader's persistence that ultimately forced him to accept the task. Fortunately, with his space-time magic, teleportation would make things much easier. To make matters worse, a blacksmith had requested an escort to the same destination as Takumi, piling yet another job onto his already overwhelming workload. The guild leader reassured him that completing all these tasks would quickly raise his rank to D, while his friends would reach E just by accompanying him. Though this sounded appealing, Takumi had never escorted anyone before, and there was a chance the Lion's fan group would also take the job. However, they were occupied with another mission, leaving him no choice but to handle it himself. Since it was a 7-day journey, the guild suggested using a monster horse to cut the trip down to 4 days. Unfortunately, they only had normal horses available. At that moment, Riel appeared to apologize, as he had been the one using the monster horses. The receptionist, however, was more concerned about whether Riel had completed his mission, which was still pending due to a black buffalo appearing along the way. This was unusual, as monsters had never been this aggressive before, making escort missions riskier than usual. As a result, the guild started offering extra rewards for taking on missions. Takumi then invited Riel to his home to rest and eat if needed, though not immediately, as the day was already packed. Meanwhile, Papek lent Takumi a personal carriage in exchange for selling him extracted materials in bulk, a deal Takumi gladly accepted. The old man also praised his refrigeration invention, though he had accidentally damaged it while testing it. By sunset, Sophia grew worried. Since Takumi had never taken this long to return, Sophia had a strong feeling that something was wrong and considered going to rescue him. That night, Takumi felt anxious as well. This might finally be his chance to find a real blacksmith. Despite speaking to several smiths, none had much contact with the one he sought, Hans. Just then, a sudden noise interrupted their conversation, and Riel sensed an approaching Anamaya hooded figure that made him instinctively want to flee. Before he could react, the figure struck, revealing herself to be Sophia. Overcome with worry for her lord, she had rushed out to find him, nearly taking Riel's life by mistake. Realizing her blunder, Sophia dropped to her knees and apologized, believing Takumi had been kidnapped. Upon arriving at Takumi's friend's house, Riel was completely lost. Even more so when he saw an evolved Maple standing before him now, a breathtaking beauty. However, to Maple, Riel was nothing but a nuisance, so she asked him to bathe before coming near her. This deeply depressed the young man, as his friend was surrounded by beautiful women while he had nowhere to spend the night. Immediately, our protagonist explained to his friend that none of them were his girlfriends. Upon hearing this, a quick-thinking Riel tried to charm Sophia, but her body and soul belonged to Takumi, and even Maria had made the same promise. This ultimately led to Riel crying while bathing, as he had been rejected for being so unattractive. Back with the group, thanks to Sophia, they decided to head straight for their special mission, as it would bring them enormous benefits and allow them to buy plenty of supplies. With that said, we see a massive magic-draining sword that Takumi wished to wield. However, due to its size, for the time being, his only option was to destroy it with magic. Yet, the ancient seal on the rock remained too powerful, leaving the young man with no choice but to struggle against the material until he achieved the desired smelting. And so, the magic-draining sword was finally forged, but at the cost of all of the protagonist's magical energy, and one of the weapons already had an owner. Because of this, the next day, everyone was ready to meet a rough man named Gambo, who thanked them for taking the mission. Nearby, we see that Maria was quite skilled at handling carriage horses, which had a simple explanation: she had been forced to learn how to ride so she wouldn't be so useless, according to her own words. Far from them, a last-minute report arrived, stating that the monsters in the forests had been more active this past year. This meant that our protagonist group would likely encounter one soon. Meanwhile, Papel received the gratitude of His Majesty for the toilet he had sent him. At the same time, he was informed that recent news had been problematic, as the Sidonia Empire had begun taking action. Now with Akira, he was fighting against Yamato, but unable to do much, the battle was decided by the sheer difference in strength between them. However, for Akira, who had achieved so much, surrender was not an option. Back with our protagonists, they knew the monsters shouldn't be venturing this far. So, to prevent anything bad from happening to their new friend, they decided that a simple protective barrier would suffice to keep him safe. This did not bother Jambo, who knew they weren't there just to protect him. Inside the forest, Takumi began asking Sophia for clues on how to distinguish a treant from a normal tree. She explained that they looked almost identical to regular trees, with the only difference being that they had a distinct aura. With magical detection, they would be able to hunt them down. In fact, Sophia had already sensed one right in front of them, so all that was left was to capture the tree, which, the moment it felt threatened, began to defend itself as best it could. But anyway, the protagonist was stronger and ended his life, an act that leveled up his system. And since they had already seen one of their companions pass to the afterlife, now everyone would be much more alert to avoid being taken down. Sophia thought once again that it would take too long if they dealt with them the old-fashioned way, so in no time, a slicing wind spell appeared, leaving no trees in the area. Along with her friends, the group was gradually able to defeat the treants. But the real problem arose when an elder monster was ready to end their lives. However, with Sophia's magic combined with Marie's and Takumi delivering the final blow, the monster didn't last long at first. But thanks to its healing ability, the tree quickly recovered all its roots. This left only one option to defeat it, attacking in a single powerful strike. With some fire magic and Sophia by his side, our protagonist managed to buy enough time to take down the ancient tree. The tree ended up bearing fruit due to the intense battle, but these fruits were anything but ordinary. They were so rare that many people had never even tasted them in their lifetime. Hours later, after defeating the treants, the group arrived at their next destination, a mining town. A picturesque place that housed an adventurers guild branch, and exterminating rogue moles was considered a great mission according to Gambo, as these mineral-eating monsters were the biggest threat to the area. The group accepted a quest to clear a mine of pests, and while working, they unexpectedly discovered mithril and close by adamantite. However, their success was interrupted when iron moles began emerging. With Maria's light magic, the mole was quickly subdued, allowing Sophia to deliver the final blow. The miner was impressed, unaware that light was a mole's weakness, but Takumi had logically assumed it due to moles living in the dark. Sophia found it strange how easy the battle was, and Maria fell down for only fighting from a distance. To cheer her up, the girls reassured her, while Takumi mined the necessary materials. The next day, they received a blacksmithing lesson and forged better equipment, including a magical knife. The girls then received special armor infused with their elemental powers, while Takumi's armor granted him lightning-like speed and power. Sophia's wind-enhanced spear and Maria's fire spear were completed, but Sophia humbly requested a shield to fight with, ready to protect Takumi with her life. Nolan, watching from afar, was reminded of a painful war memory. Meanwhile, in Sidonia, Akira and Yamato prepared to create chaos for their kingdom's benefit. Takumi finished the shield Sophia requested, but felt guilty for making his lord work so hard. Back in Balikatos, the king received a threatening letter, signaling an inevitable war between the kingdoms. If you've made it this far into the video, don't forget to write the word exquisito in the comment section. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.